Mouth breather. Today, somewhat more comically, hoodie breather. Because I still have issues with my face after all this time, and I would rather look ridiculous than horrific, um, been a long time. Wanted often to record, but couldn't maintain focus on a particular subject to discuss until today. The inspiration this time was a bus driver who, seemingly just because she wanted to take a lunch break, decided to stop the bus that she was driving and get out for about 5 minutes to go warm up some food in the store's microwave. Perhaps this is allowed, perhaps she was simply getting away with it, perhaps she didn't care whether it was against the rules or she felt justified. I can't really throw stones from within my glass house because I do similarly unprofessional things at work, but it got me thinking about the sad reality of modern life. There was a time when we had an expectation in our culture of high professional standards, and we did not have sympathy for people who fell short of those standards because we recognized that every individual has an obligation to maintain a certain level of professional discipline, especially when they're being paid for their time. If you're out on your own recognizance, then you're required only to maintain the bare minimum of social order and expectations, which again, so the expectations that are bare minimum for random people out on the street have gone way, way down, even since I was a kid, and even further down than that between when I was a kid and like the 1950s, which is kind of the mental image everyone has crystallized. Although a lot of that may come from pop culture that was in fashion at the time. It's not certain exactly how much that was true back in the day when people were actually doing, the various things that they did on a day-to-day basis in that time period as opposed to after 2 decades. So we can't be 100% sure, but we know that there has been a general downward movement since those days, basically starting with the hippies at Woodstock and other phenomena throughout the counterculture 60s and into the Vietnam rebellion 70s, and then things moved back a little more in a conservative direction for the 80s, and then exploded into a relatively positive form of liberalism during the 90s, which was a good time to be alive, I say, having been a teenager then, but it also sowed the seeds for some of the social disharmony that we've seen since then. So it took a long time for the pendulum to kind of swing back because the whole time that we had the Bush presidency, everyone was saying how terrible he was, and the whole time we had the first Trump presidency, everyone said how terrible he was, and we didn't have a heavily criticized liberal president basically any time from Jimmy Carter to all the way up to the end of the Obama presidency. America had a mostly positive attitude, and then Biden screwed up several issues so royally that sentiment finally turned against him, and therefore Trump got to pull his Grover Cleveland impersonation. So all throughout that time, the cultural zeitgeist lauded the Democrats and vilified the Republicans, regardless of what was actually going on the street. So there was a general laxing of social expectations that reached its crescendo during the Biden administration, in part because being locked up for coronavirus kind of broke everyone. So this is still on the subject, but I didn't actually mean to talk about politics. That was a digression that I got suckered into that I should not have devoted as much time to. So what I wanted to talk about actually is not the social and political and economic details that led to the social climate, but the social climate itself. So, 50s is the epitome, and then 40s because we had to go win the war, and then we did win the war, and then we had another war in Korea. There was a strong sense of patriotism and social responsibility during those times. And then, while we were busy having civil rights movements and so forth in the 60s, that kind of fell apart. I'm not necessarily anti-civil rights, but the same people who were in favor of civil rights were also in favor of a lot of other things that were sort of anti-establishment, and I think heavily influenced by communist agitators from Soviet Union and possibly communist China coming over here and agitating and trying to discourage America from having an unchallenged hegemony and ensure that the Soviet Union had some hope of competing with them, despite the fact that it was horribly oppressive to its own people and thus not well positioned to survive in a conflict against a highly motivated, patriotic, hardworking American work. So you get the point I'm making, and this is still not what I'm trying to talk about. So we used to have this sense of what society required of the individual. We were not super duper selfish, even though we were starting to move in that direction with consumer culture, which is one thing that can be laid at the conservatives' feet that kind of helped this whole social decay along. But the selfishness and the self-righteousness and the refusal to cooperate and the refusal to be put in one's place and all of this all came out of the breakdown of a sense that we were all cells in the body of America that all had an obligation to work together so that America itself could stay strong and healthy, and therefore all of us as its citizens would prosper together. I'm not going to delve into the questions of, was that less true for, say, African Americans? There are a lot of questions you could potentially validly ask there and argue back and forth about various issues, but I'm just looking at the general overall trend. Most of the people of America, back then at least, and even to this day, are white. I know it doesn't seem that way. I live in a city, and almost all cities have significant ethnic minority populations, but this country is made up of everyone, not just the city dwellers. And if you get out into the country, it's virtually 100% white in most areas. So whites are still the majority, and I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that if the system is mostly working for whites, then it is mostly working for most of the people in the entire country. The people who have the right to vote, doesn't matter whether they live city or country, and the country counties get a vote and the city counties get a vote, and there's some degree of balance in the Senate and the House, all of that good stuff. So for most of the culture, it has mostly been working. And it used to be understood that everybody had obligations to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. But that has fallen apart in the modern age. People are really selfish and self-focused and self-righteous and egocentric and have really given way to the classic vices as spoken of in Christendom, most especially sloth and carelessness, which is a type of sloth, and greed is another gigantic one, both avarice in not wanting to give up what you have and what used to be called luxuria, which is wanting to acquire more than you need. When the original list of the 7 deadly sins was drawn up, lust was not originally on there. And at one point there were 8 sins when Christianity had not yet decided that the number 7 was their sacred number, that they were going to have as many multiples of as possible in their scripture. So various early Christian thinkers had put out the concept of sin and debated back and forth about which sins were the deadliest. And their list is flawed and kind of redundant in some places. 4 out of the 7 could be summarized as forms of desire, and Buddhism says that all suffering originates with desire and inability to let go of it. So all of that is, again, tangential. My point in bringing all of this up is that it used to be that there was this strong social understanding, and in particular, if you were getting paid for your time, then it wasn't just that you gave up your time in order to gain money. You were also being a part of your company, and you were expected to behave yourself in a way that would reflect positively on the professional image of your company. So there was a high standard of professional conduct, and that is pretty much gone, and that is why that bus driver could, just go entitle herself to a 5-minute break and just stop the bus. I don't know whether she was ahead of schedule and had the luxury of being able to stop the bus, or if she was willing to be late. This particular bus is frequently late, possibly due to traffic, so it might not be entirely the driver's fault. But I think that the fact that we are in a labor shortage right now means that employers are kind of desperate, and they're willing to take a lot of people who don't measure up to what used to be the bare minimum professional standards. So we now have lots of people who are doing their job, and this includes me. I'm not throwing stones from within a glass house. I am part of this problem too. Lots of people are doing an okay job and not giving 110%, which is reasonable because they're not being paid 110% of their actual salary, but it kind of sucks because there used to be this cultural zeitgeist that said that we were all part of a grand movement forward of our culture and all the various subsets within it. And so I'm not blaming that bus driver, and I'm certainly not blaming myself. I'm saying that it is sad that our society has an illness within its collective social body, and I am one germ, and the bus driver is one germ, possibly slightly more infectious than me, but that's a selfish opinion, so you may disregard it. But the patient is sick. Our culture is sick, and it does no good to blame one particular germ, because even if the infection started with one particular germ, and that's usually not the case, it probably starts with several thousand germs that are all in one particular drop of water, or whatever. But once the infection starts, the problem is that it is spreading, that more and more germs are contributing to the increasing toxin levels within the body that are causing the illness symptoms. So our culture does not have the health that it used to have. It does not have the level of united strength of purpose and clarity and meaning and all of that. And again, might all be the Soviet Union's fault. Might all be the fault of idiots who became hippies and didn't realize they were being manipulated by communist agitators. But then again, that may be untrue. There's a lot we don't know. And so the point is not to point fingers and act as though I know the answer. The point is just to say that it's really kind of sad that things have disintegrated to the extent that they have. That we are just not living in we used to be living in a society that saw itself as a beacon on a hill, and now we're just kind of keeping on, and people don't try as hard as they maybe could, and I lament that. I'm not saying that it's a fixable problem, and I'm not saying that we can blame anyone, even though I have admitted that I am part of the problem. I am part of the group that's at fault. But the important point is to figure out why it happened and how can we reverse the trend. Probably not within our lifetimes, but what steps can we take now that will resurrect the spirit that America once had and make it so that people want to try harder again, want to feel proud of what they are contributing to, and want to work together, want to stop being selfish, want to stop forgiving themselves for their sins, and want to try harder not to sin, want to try and improve themselves. As used to be everybody had the attitude of we're going to work overtime to try and make ourselves better. Now everybody's just kind of trying to stay alive and stay the same and get as much of a grab bag of stuff for themselves as they can, which completely ignores the fact that you can't take it with you. And There's a whole other tangent that I could go into about whether people would behave differently if they knew absolutely that there was or wasn't an afterlife, and the ambiguity causes problems. I've talked about that a little before. Anyway, I've gone over 15 minutes, and that's not historically unprecedented, but I'm a little uncomfortable because I'm wearing layers on a hot day. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here and just say, like I said, it's kind of sad, it kind of sucks, and I really kind of wish we could do better.